Welcome back to Ozarks Tonight. We're talking about the Kurds and the situation over in Syria and Turkey with our two guests, two experts on the Middle East. You told me you just got back from Iraq a few days ago, and you both have experience talking with Kurds in that region. But before we get into more of this discussion, let's do a little history here. Who are the Kurds? They don't have their own country or anything like that. So tell us who they are and where they came from.
Sure. So the Kurds are an ethnic group in the Middle East with their own distinctive language or set of languages, which are different from Arabic, different from Turkish, and different from Persian. They live in a contiguous area, which is often referred to as Kurdistan, although that doesn't refer to a specific nation state. Basically, today, the Kurdish populations in Kurdistan is divided between different nation states in the region. So there's a Kurdish population in Iran, in Iraq, in Syria, and the biggest portion is in Turkey. And in each of those parts of Kurdistan, each part of Kurdistan has its own different political parties and political organizations. Sometimes there are rivalries between one another, but by and large, they're a sort of specific national group that does not have a nation state in the Middle East, although there is a sort of common overarching sense of Kurdishness amongst those groups. And they're predominantly Muslim, but there are minorities of Shias, there are Yazidis, who are a religious group which sometimes are regarded as Kurds, sometimes regarded as their own separate community, as well as small numbers of Christians, and earlier, there's also a significant Kurdish Jewish population, which now mostly lives in Israel after the creation of the State of Israel. Many of them had to leave their homeland and go to Israel.
So getting back then to the larger question of what's going on over there with this Turkey or Turkish invasion or incursion, whatever you want to call it, is it simply a matter of the Kurds doing or needing to do better PR and saying to Turkey, we're not going to do anything terroristic to you, don't come in here? Or is it a situation where it's now the horse has left the barn in that case and there's nothing much that can be done?
I'm not sure what the Kurds could have done to forestall a Turkish invasion. You know, in 2013, the Syrian Kurdish leaders were visiting Ankara and Istanbul, no problem. The Turks were giving them visas and so forth. It was after some domestic political changes in Turkey after the 2015 elections that the President Erdogan and his ruling party took a shift to the right, made a coalition government with a far-right party, the MHP, and decided to reignite the war with the Kurds. It was largely a choice, I believe. And it played well to their base to be fighting the enemy, and suddenly the Syrian Kurds became persona non grata and terrorists, whereas they used to be, their leaders were visiting Ankara. They helped Turkey around 2014 evacuate an ancient tomb that was from one of the Ottoman Empire's founders. They guarded the Turkish forces as they went in to evacuate this tomb, and now suddenly they're the enemy. They haven't attacked Turkey. That border's been quiet. That this whole Turkish talk of need for a safe zone is just an excuse to try to go in there and crush them.
Okay, and so let's get back to that. What do you think the outcome will be of this operation? Is it going to essentially, as you say, crush the Kurds? They seem like they can fight pretty well, though. Is this going to be a protracted sort of engagement, or what do you think?
Well, when we're talking about urban combat, a lot depends on how much Turkey is willing to bomb to smithereens, because you can end urban combat quickly if you're willing to kill everyone in the city and just flatten it. If you're not, then you have to fight house to house. And even though the Kurds are severely outgunned, Turkey's a NATO member, has all the weapons we gave them or sold them. When you fight house to house, the tanks and the aircraft aren't as useful, and the Kurds know how to do this very well. That could be a very bloody endeavor for Turkey that could last a long time. The Kurdish strategy has to be to hold on until this all becomes too unacceptable for the international community, for President Trump, for the United States establishment. Even now we have...
It already seems as it is,
yeah,
that it is unacceptable to even most Republicans.
No. Bipartisan condemnation of Trump's decision, which is kind of unheard of.
Do we have any understanding as to why the president moved in this direction? Is it a complete surprise to most? Well, it's not something that was expected, was it? Or did I miss something?
I mean, it's very difficult to know what the president was thinking when he sort of agreed to withdraw U.S. troops from the border. And I would note, this is not a complete withdrawal from Syria. This is just a removal of U.S. troops from the border regions, from the areas that the Turks have sort of claimed that they want to use as a safe zone. And for President Erdogan of Turkey, you know, this operation is sort of killing several birds with one stone. He is trying to, on one hand, he wants to get rid of the Syrian refugees in his country. It's becoming increasingly unpopular. There's 4 million Syrian refugees in the country, and he wants to sort of turf the Kurds out of the region on the border and put those Syrian refugees in that region. Another factor is that by launching a war against the Kurds, a rapprochement between Kurdish groups and Turkish opposition, which had been growing, especially since a very important election in Istanbul, that's broken now because most of the Turkish political parties are supporting this and the Kurdish political party is not supporting this. And of course, there's a lot of construction opportunities when for businesses tied to President Erdogan. So it's this operation makes a lot of political sense for Turkey's president, but I do not see what benefit either the United States or even President Trump gets out of this particular arrangement. It's hard to tell, and I think we're going to have to wait until we find out what was said on the telephone when he spoke to President Erdogan on Sunday.
I think Trump just backed down on this phone call. Erdogan spoke to him tough about how Turkey intends to go in, and the United States has a lot of leverage on Turkey. Could have said...
yeah, it's a NATO member, so you think about NATO and...
Right. They could have said, we'll push you out of NATO if you go ahead and do this, we'll sanction you, we'll not allow you to use the airspace. He had any number of things short of putting American troops in between that he could have said, but I think he just backed down. And I think he caved on the issue. And
why do you think he's digging in? I mean, you've got all these Republicans now who are saying this is a bad idea. Even Lindsey Graham, it's a bad idea.
He'd have to admit he was wrong.
I mean, these are real people who will die as a result of this. This is not just political rhetoric in a campaign.
Yeah, he's trying to say this is to get out of endless wars and so forth, but Syria is a weird place to start.
Well, and we just dropped 2,000 troops into Saudi Arabia. The announcement came through today, so...
We got less than 1,000 special forces on the most successful operation we ever did who didn't have to fight, and meanwhile we've got people in Afghanistan, Iraq, Bahrain, Korea, you name it. He wants to start in Syria so that our allies can get steamrolled and 2 days later. It's strange.
It doesn't make much sense, but this is an ongoing story, and we appreciate both of you being here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll be back after this.